You know, when I first bought my real camera as I was heading into retirement, I honestly thought it was going to be pretty simple. I'd been taking pictures for a long time. You know, how hard can this be? You pointed out a beautiful scene, press the button, and it would just happen. But that is not the way it went. I came home with so many disappointing images. They were soft, noisy, badly exposed, awful composition. And I remember thinking, boy, this is going to be a whole lot harder than I thought. But I kept working at it. My name's Jerry Kita, and I am a landscape and wildlife photographer. And I'm on a journey. And there's a lot of things I've learned along the way, but there's a number of things that I wish someone had taken me aside and said, hey, why don't you start with these things? It'll make your life a whole lot easier. And what I want to do in this video is to kind of take you through what for me were big game changers. And you might have yours that are different, but I'd like to let you know what mine are, how I came to find them out, and the changes that they've made to my personal photography. There are 5 photography game changers that made a huge difference for me. Things like how I focus, how I think about ISO, and even the gear I actually carry. Some of these things were just new functions that I learned about that I hadn't previously knew about or understood, and some of them just added to the convenience of being a photographer. They aren't theoretical tips from a textbook. For me, these are real-world changes that took me from frustrated and often overwhelmed to coming home actually excited to look at my photos. And here's the thing, I didn't learn all these things right away. And as I said earlier, if someone had come and told me, hey, Jerry, give these things a try, my life would have been a whole lot easier. So whether you're just starting out or you've been at this for a while and feel stuck, my goal in this video is to have at least one of these game changers click for you. And if you walk away with something you can use in your very next outing, then that'll be great.
Nothing bad can happen here, could it?
So let's start with something that I ignored for a long time, and that's back button focus. So a little bit of background. When I first got my camera, we were just entering COVID and the lockdowns were beginning and we weren't doing a lot of traveling. And what I was left with is doing a lot of bird photography in the backyard. And luckily for me, we've got a great backyard that attracts a lot of birds. However, it was very frustrating. And the reason that it was frustrating that I just couldn't get good shots. I had purchased what I thought was a very good lens. In fact, it is a very good lens, still is. But I wasn't getting very good results. The photos were soft, and the best photos were barely acceptable. And what I began to understand was that when I hit the shutter release, the camera was also focusing at the same time. Not a great revelation, and most times that isn't an issue. But when you're dealing with fast-moving objects such as birds, it doesn't take much for the focal plane to change, knocking the subject, which in this case is the birds, out of focus. And it was hugely frustrating. And that's when I saw some information about back button focus, and that made all the difference in the world. So suddenly shots that were, turning out, that were originally very, very soft and of course unacceptable, became pin sharp. And of course, there's no circumstance where every photo is a winner. But I tell you, my hit rate went up substantially, probably by a factor of 10. And I'm not exaggerating. So that's been an absolute revelation. So what back button focus actually does is it separates the function of the shutter release from the function of focusing. And the way that is accomplished is by assigning the focus function to another button, which is usually in the back of the camera, hence the name back button focus. And most cameras today allow you to do that, and every brand will do it slightly different, and you've got to check your manual to see how it's done. But if you can do it on your camera, I would suggest you give it a try. I think you might like it a lot. So let's go on to game changer number 2. After I purchased my camera, I very quickly followed that up by a purchase of a good set of quality filters, both neutral density filters as well as a circular polarizer. And the filters that I bought were great. Loved the performance. They did a great job on a trip where we were going to do photography for. However, I took them with me on a trip where we were going to do photography for about 4 or 5 days. And what I began to notice some shortcomings. And again, it wasn't with the performance, it wasn't with the glass, everything was great. However, what I did notice is that the whole set was fairly bulky. It took up a lot of space in my backpack, and it also took me a fair bit of time to set up. So it might take me anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes to set it up on the camera. And what I was noticing is that I was now making a decision in real time as to whether or not it was worth the effort to pull out a filter or not, even though there were many times that I knew that I really did need a filter and my photography would benefit from it. That, for me, ultimately was a problem. And the revelation for me came when I discovered that there were magnetic filters that existed. And let me show you the filters that I use. These are by Case. And by the way, they're not sponsoring me, but they fit in a very compact case. All the filters, let me see if you can see this. All the filters are in here. I can pull one out very easily. And what you have to do is to buy a step-up ring for each of your lenses such that each of the lenses can use these filters. This has really, really worked out well for me. And it's got a little clasp on it that I can put it on my belt loop, or I can even, if I'm wearing a jacket, I can, clasp it to the top of the jacket, and it just kind of hangs right here, which makes it extremely, extremely convenient. Before we get into game changer number 3, let's just do a quick recap on the filters. One of the key elements of that discussion is that sometimes you're just looking for more convenience, not more function. And the same thing is true of game changer number 3, and that is getting a lighter tripod. Now, I guess I've got a weird relationship with tripods anyways. When I first bought my camera, I declared that I would never, ever consider spending more than $150 on a tripod. Well, I realized that was a big mistake fairly quickly, and I did end up buying a very nice tripod. It was very sturdy, and it did a great job in the field. A couple of things that I learned about it very quickly when I took it on some long hikes. First of all, when it folded up, it really wasn't very compact, and very often I had to carry it by hand. It just wasn't able to kind of attach itself to my camera bag. The other thing I realized, which was more of an issue, was that it was extremely heavy. And when you're at home and you want to pick it up quickly, it doesn't feel very heavy. But when you go ahead and take it on a many-mile hike, you realize, hey, this is not going to work for me. So I got a carbon fiber tripod. Made a huge difference. Whereas before I was forced to make a decision, do I really need this tripod on this trip? Now I take the tripod with me all the time. It still isn't the lightest piece of equipment that I have, but it is certainly a whole lot more manageable. And I'm very grateful that I made the decision to not only buy a tripod that cost more than $150, but a carbon fiber tripod that I've really gotten some tremendous use out of, and it's just made it so much more convenient. So let's move on to game changer number 4. There was a time that I would absolutely freak out because I couldn't get my ISO down to 100 on any image. And let's be clear, ISO is important, but what I found I was doing, I was making unnecessary compromises to my image by forcing myself into a low ISO when in some instances it was really unnecessary. And let's look at one example here. So consider an example where I'm looking at a waterfall. And the way I do waterfalls is I want to find kind of the ideal shutter speed because I want the waterfall to look a certain way. And my sweet spot is somewhere between 0.4 seconds and 0.6 seconds, generally speaking. So you see an example here where I'm kind of experimenting. I started with 0.5 and moved it down to 0.4. I took a shot, I took a look at it and decided, I need to slow it down just a little bit more. So I think I settled on 1/4 second. And I finally found a shot that I liked. So I said, okay, I'm going to lock in on 1/4 second and then set both the aperture and the ISO accordingly. I always like to set the aperture, if I can, to about f16 on that particular lens, that particular camera. That gives me consistently the best results. And then what I do in this example as the last step is I make sure that I get the exposure right and that everything is falling within the range of the histogram. And as you can see, that's going to be somewhere, between 800 and, in this example, you'll see it's about 500 ISO. And with my camera, I am more than capable of getting good results with, a fairly high ISO. And for certain applications, I've gone as high as 3200. And with software that you've got available today, like Topaz, or even the software that's available within Lightroom and Photoshop, you're still going to get good results. Ultimately, this has freed me up to really look at a scene, and I can optimize the exposure triangle, be it ISO, be it aperture, be it shutter speed, and make it suitable for the particular image that I'm working on. Moving right along. When you do landscape photography, you are often setting up a composition where you've got something in the foreground, something in the middle ground, and something in the background. And there is a need often to ensure that the photo is in focus from the foreground all the way to the background. And if you've got an instance where the foreground is very, very close to the camera, it becomes next to impossible to focus the shot with just one image. What's going to happen is you might be focused on the foreground, but the midground and the background are severely out of focus, or vice versa. And that leads to something called focus stacking, which, if you've done landscape photography for any period of time, you understand what that is taking a successive set of images through a scene where the foreground, the midground, and the background are all in focus on each of those images, or on one of those images. And then what you do with the software afterwards is you kind of blend that photo together to ensure that you've got good focus from the front all the way to the back. That's probably the most simple explanation of what focus stacking is all about. Now, when you want to do that in the field, very often what you can do is, if you're set up your camera in live view such that you're looking at the scene through the LED, and we're all assuming that you're on a tripod here, you can just use your finger to point out, what part of the scene is going to be in focus. Now, that often can work, and at times it'll work well. Where it becomes a little problematic is when you've got a fairly chaotic scene and you can't be absolutely certain that what you think you're pointing at is really what's going to be in focus. And that's where live view focus comes into play. And what live view focus allows you to do is to expand the scene such that you can be very, very precise about where you're focusing. And what happens is you leave no doubt whatsoever that a particular point in the image is in focus. And when I learned of this for the very first time, my first reaction was, how did I not know this? But it was just something that I wasn't familiar with, and I have to admit, I use it all the time. Whenever I'm out shooting and I've got the tripod, I am using live view focus every chance I get. And I've seen just tremendous results from it. And I'm sure if you do, you'll see tremendous results also. So those are the big game changers, the 5 of them that have really made a big difference in my photography. But I'm going to give you one more as a bonus. A couple of weeks ago, I bought a pair of rubber boots because I just hate when I'm out getting my feet wet. And now what it allows me to do is to walk into the water and maybe get shots that I wouldn't otherwise get. I know it's kind of silly, but it works for me. But seriously, the things that I've talked about today have really made a big difference in my photography. And they're not, industry secrets or anything that most of you, wouldn't figure out on your own, but they've certainly helped me out. Now, if you've stuck around until now, I appreciate it. If you've seen anything here that you like, please consider giving me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. I'd really be interested in understanding what your game changers have been during your photography growth. And also consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, we'll see you.